Yeah, and finally they're like, you should go back $30,000 extra dollars for our town, everybody.
Good morning, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. You're set up on the. She said, all right, good morning. It is 8:31 a.m. by our clock on November 19th, 2025, and we will get started with roll call.
Thank you. All right, Stacy Dupuy.
Here.
Michaela Owens.
Here.
Tom Laws.
Here.
Cody Hillman.
Present.
Alex Yan.
Here.
Bob Callahan. Lindy Lindstrom. Clay Tucker. Carla Nelson for Michelle Barron.
Here.
Dan Lister.
Here.
Deb Root. Bree Brush.
Here.
Deanna Dupuy. Morgan Besaw. Haley Hart.
Here.
Nicole Baird Spencer. Andrew Glassbell.
Here.
Hannah Veal.
I'm here.
Lee Belt. Troy Behunin.
Present.
Doug Hansen.
Here.
Daryl Romine.
Here.
Caleb Hood. Brian McClure.
Here.
Jason Van Gilder.
Present.
Crystal Craig.
Here.
Mente Salinas.
Here.
Mark Stoyer.
Here.
Rob Hartsock.
Here.
Matt Qualls.
Here.
Sean Nickel.
Good morning. Here.
Chelsea Johnson.
Here.
Joe McMullen. Gabe Finkelstein.
Here.
Michael Toole.
Here.
Aaron Bodges.
Present.
Jason Wild. Stephen Hunt.
Here.
Miranda Carson.
Here.
Curtis Lovelace.
Present.
And I am here. And Cody Lund. Do we have a quorum? I believe we do have a quorum. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tony. As a reminder for all of those joining us virtually, if you have the ability, please make sure your video is on so that they can see you on Facebook. We will start with since one is done, we'll start with 2, open discussion and announcements. Go ahead, Tony.
Madam Chair, I have 2 announcements. One of them is just a reminder that phase 1s are due today at midnight, applications. And then we will be following up any eligible applications to apply for phase 2. That'll be by December 20th. And then phase 2 applications will be due at January 20th. So those are coming up soon, especially tonight with phase 1. And I just wanted to remind you now about phase 2 because it is likely that our December RTEC meeting will be canceled. We have very little that's anticipated for December, and unless something changes between now and a couple of weeks, we will probably cancel. Don't take it off your calendar yet, but we anticipate that it will likely be canceled. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony. I will build on that. I want to also say thank you to Compass and Compass's staff. The changes you guys did to the phase 1 applications, I think really made it easier, at least on the city of Nampa side, to fill everything out. So Much appreciated, and thank you for that. Any other announcements? Moving on, item 3 is the consent agenda. It is on page 3 and 6 of your packet respectively. It's the minutes and then the RTAC meeting dates, and I will stand for a motion.
Madam Chair, this is Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
All right, I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Item 4A is ACHD commuter ride, and Nicole Stern will give a presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to present. We appreciate the support that we get from Compass and RTAC over the years. For the record, Nicole Stern, ACHD Commuter Ride Manager. I'm coming to you today as an informational piece on ACHD Commuter Ride, a bit about our history, our programs and services, and our funding. ACHD started promoting ride sharing in 1974 during the energy crisis in the early 70s. At the time, the Boise Metropolitan Transportation Study began carpool matching Boise residents. The staff was paid by ACHD and other government agencies participating in the study at the time. ACHD's van pool program started in 1976 with 2 rented vehicles from the Sun Valley Ski Resort. Fun fact, we are actually the first multi-employer van pool program in the nation. Additionally, our vans were purchased by the district as the program continued to grow. The Boise Metropolitan Transportation Study dissolved a few years later. However, the program did continue with a full-time coordinator and part-time secretary through ACHD. During the 90s and early 2000s, CMAQ funds provided money to increase the staff for outreach and for marketing purposes and the procurement of additional vans. Currently, STBG grants are utilized for funding, marketing, and outreach efforts. Since 2005, the commuter ride team has employed 8 full-time employees providing van pool services as well as our business and commuter outreach. In 2024, we initiated a grant funding initiative, a pilot program called Walk, Bike, and Ride through the TIP process, which is scheduled to conclude at the end of this fiscal year. Our mission and vision at Commuter Ride is support businesses and individuals working in the Treasure Valley with green commute options. We really see the Treasure Valley where businesses and commuters champion green commute options, advocate for transportation, and participate in green commuting activities. So why do we do this? ACHD Commuter Ride's main goal is to reduce single occupancy vehicles and ease roadway congestion. So how do we do that? We provide van pool, ride matching, and commuting services. We promote sustainable transportation, and we partner with agencies, businesses, and individuals. We offer a wide range of services, and I'll talk briefly about each of those programs and its services here. So people know us mostly through our van pool program. They are the red vans crisscrossing the Treasure Valley. It is the most large and most impactful program at ACHD Commuter Ride. Currently, we serve 9 counties ranging from Ontario all the way to Elmore County. Our vans must either start, end, or go through Ada County, and this is a legislative mandate. Currently, we have 85 routes, and we have 106 vans in our fleet. Our van fares cover the maintenance, cover insurance, administrative costs, fuel, car washes, and bike racks. And those fares currently start at $65 a month, and those are determined by the mileage of each van for each route. And just to give you an idea of the area residents that are served by our van pools, so we do have a wide range here in Canyon, Ada County, as well as surrounding community residents. And this is just a snippet of the employers that we serve currently. This is not all of them, but these are large employers that we do currently serve. And so what does that impact look like for our van pool? So we currently have over 800 riders that we have served in fiscal year 25. We have 3.3 million miles that we've taken off Treasure Valley roadways with almost 120,000 trips saved. So those are a single occupancy trip saved off of the roadways. And over 2,500 tons of CO2 is reduced out of the air just with our van pool services. Another one of our services is our employer outreach. This includes working with area businesses to develop commute programs that encourage their employees to use green commute options, also known as alternative transportation, to and from work. We know that transportation demand studies have said that if an employer is supportive of transportation options, employees are more apt to try a mode, whether it's van pool, carpool, transit, biking, or walking. And since COVID, telework, obviously. It's whatever mode works best. We work with businesses to develop custom commute plans and the programs and rewards. We do this through their wellness and their benefit programs to see for the business what benefits is for the business as well as for their employees. These services that we do, the employer services, are in both Canyon and Ada County. And just to show you a little bit about our employer impact, this year, fiscal year 25, we engaged over 70 businesses in programs, as well as having 65 events, over 65 events, or what we call presentations, informational tablings and such. We do have a program, a campaign that we promote during the spring called May in Motion. Many of you have probably heard of it or participated, and that is a campaign that we really like to promote with our businesses, very focused on the business, so then they understand the benefits that they can provide to their employees. And so they see the benefit that it is for them and what that brings of happy, healthier, wealthier employees, and the employees see the benefit as well. Lastly, just to talk about our community outreach and the programs there. We have a ride matching website called Share the Ride Idaho, where individuals can go in and they can put in their address of their crossroads of where they live, where they work, and up pops their commuting options, whether that's a van pool or transit routes, carpool matches, bike routes, walking routes, whatever may work for them. Share the Ride Idaho is also where businesses can have their commute programs where they can then encourage their employees and have rewards through there. We also conduct campaigns and events throughout the year to promote to community members and the general public. And we do a lot of that through our collaboration with other agencies. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like in FY25, we've had over 7,000 people register on Share the Ride Idaho. And we have 1.2 million miles, we missed the million there, off of our Treasure Valley roadways. And of the people that have logged, 163,000 trips have been saved. and almost 1,000 tons of CO2 reduced. And that is from people choosing to log in Share the Ride Idaho. And so why do we do this? What does this really affect? And so really it is the effective use of our transportation and infrastructure that we have. It minimizes the wear and tear on the roads. And also, like I've just stated, we're decreasing the air pollution in Treasure Valley. So who does this work? This is our team currently of the 8 that, actually 9 that I've mentioned. We do have some vacancies, and we'll be looking in this beginning of the fiscal year to bring people on board. And so wrapping up just the last few moments, I briefly want to share just what it looks like for the commuter ride department and our funding. So we're essentially a business within a government agency. We keep our van pool fares completely separate, and so from our general fund at ACHD. And so ACHD had created a enterprise fund. And so our funding sources range from our van pool fares, ACHD support, grants, and in the past, van sales have been able to go back into the program. Recently, sale proceeds for our vans, that has changed at the discretion of the federal administration. So we'll see where that holds in the future. Our grant funding from Compass TIP dates back to the early 2000s. And since 2007, we have received $275,000 annually. Since our funding is limited to the funding sources outlined, we do really choose to run as a business. And so we do face challenges like many of your agencies. So we have regional growth, program growth, as well as inflation that have outpaced our funding. Expenses, outreach, and our staffing needs have increased without additional support. And so what we're looking at is our next steps, where ACHD will work with Compass staff during the CIM process to discuss opportunities for additional funding. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Wow, thank you, Nicole. That was really great. I don't think I knew that commuter ride was over 50 years old. That's amazing. Any questions for Nicole?
All right, thanks
Yeah.
guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Next item is an action item. It is item 5A, recommend balancing in the transportation management area with Tony Tisdale.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. There we go. This is a balancing item. We have a little bit of money that's available today for balancing, only in the Transportation Alternatives Program. So today we will cover the kind of a review of the balancing process at a very high level. We'll look at the request and not so much the recommended action today because we have some ties, but we will rely on you as for that recommendation to move forward. And then we'll have some discussion and hopefully we'll get a recommendation for you for action. The rationale priorities is to target any available funding first towards construction of projects and then use funds for right-of-way or design to keep those projects moving. We want to keep scheduled projects on task and maybe advance as much as possible. That's kind of the overall arching theme of all of this, is to keep projects moving. Needs that are currently in other programs, but that qualify and are eligible for the programs in the transportation management area would be a lower priority, but they would still be eligible for balancing. So this is based on a withdrawn project from the city of Meridian at the end of the summer, or right before we went out for public comment for the update. The city requested to withdraw the project on Eagle Road. And so that allowed some funding to become available in 2026. Their design was supposed to begin, and so there was 92,000 available for that. And then the requests that we have are for converting some advanced construction or other needs in projects that are existing. So in your packet on page 9, you'll find a little bit more detail in there, but here is kind of a summarized version of all the requests we have on the table now. The top 3 are shown there as underlined. That means that in our policy, the criteria are tied. You'll see there, they're all a 2A. And then we have 2 below that for safe routes, or let me first say that all the 2As are ACHD projects. They all have some form of advanced construction associated with them. So it's either converting local funds or future federal funds into fiscal year 2026 federal funding. All of these are eligible for transportation alternative funding. The next one is Safe Routes to School. They had a request for some additional funding to bring their estimate up to par with what they're currently experiencing with expenses. And then the State Street project has been on the list for quite some time, and we've whittled away at a $1.2 million request, and that's just the remainder of their request that's still on the table. So I will stand here for any questions. If you have questions about these or have recommendations on which of the tied projects to move forward, and then we'll move into a motion.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to just say a word about the Safe Routes to School program that we're requesting funding for. I know this is usually going towards capital projects and construction. The expenses that we're trying to fund in the Safe Routes to School program would support staff, and that's the reason that it's on here. And given the amounts that are balancing, I guess I would like to request that the RTAC consider prioritizing the Safe Routes to School program, the $80,000 as the balancing project to move forward.
Madam Chair, this is Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
I agree with Stephen. I think with the amount of funding that's available, and given that we're talking about real people and salaries with the priority 3B, it makes sense to fully fund that first.
Thank you, Tom. Stephen? Are there any questions or concerns with the remaining $12,000? Does ACHD have a preference with the 3 tied place?
Madam Chair, this is Tom again. I think ACHD would recommend following similar to what's shown here, with the Vista Avenue being first priority, 5 miles second, then pedestrian crossing third. So with the updated order, what that would mean would be the Safe Routes to School project would be fully funded, and the remaining 12,000 or so would then go to Vista Avenue.
Thank you. I appreciate that input.
Need a
from you.
piece of gum, honey?
Gabe, do you have a question?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions or comments regarding the action? All right, then I will stand for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Stephen.
I'd move that RTAC recommends the TAP TMA balancing actions as discussed, which would fully fund the Safe Routes to School project, followed with the remainder funding the Vista Avenue project.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any other discussion on this action? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That was an
Thank
easy-
you.
Action item 5B is recommend amendments to the Communities in Motion 2050 and the FY 2025 to 2031 and FY 2026 2032 Regional Transportation Improvement Programs. It looks like Gus is going to start us off. Gus, would you mind starting over and turning your mic on? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of RTAC, I am Gus Leffelholtz, a senior planner for Compass. Today, I will be seeking your recommendation of the Compass Board of Directors regarding proposed resolutions amending Communities in Motion 2050 and the TIP. So today we are requesting your recommendation to add 2 projects to the TIP and 1 project to CIM 2050 and change 1 project in both the TIP and Communities in Motion. So 2 types of projects from Communities in Motion 2050 we are talking about today and seeking your recommendation for are capital projects on state highways and projects that use federal funds. Both resolutions are in your packet on pages 15 to 21. Just a reminder, the formal resolution number will be created when the board packet is finalized. It's important to remember that Communities in Motion is not a static document. It's living and breathing and subject to changes as projects develop and new funding sources are attained. These changes ensure that the fiscal constraint for the plan is met. So speaking of new funding sources, ACHD was awarded a $18.3 million build grant to fund the construction phase of the Build Boise Bench project. The design phase of the project was funded by a 2023 RAISE award. The project will improve safety for road users in 4 different segments in Boise. So if this next project looks familiar, it's because it came before RTAC in April. The project scope is for the widening on State Highway 69. And the scope is being shortened from Columbia Road, just north of Lake Hazel Road, based on changes to the agreement for the State Tax Anticipation Revenue Program, or STAR. STAR between the developer and ITD. So the same width on State Highway 69 will be built out, but the shorter project will create a cost savings of $10.5 million. And with that, I'll pass the presentation to Tony for discussion of the TIP amendments.
Hey, thanks, Gus. Okay, so on the amendments to the TIP, these are, it's resolution XB at this point, and the first 2 are the same as what Gus just discussed, the additional ACHD build grant project and also the scope change on the State Highway 69 project. Plus, we have 1 additional project to replace 3 vehicles in the Boise State University fleet. That's at the request of Valley Regional Transit for a total cost of about $596,000. This is using Federal Transit Administration 5307 large urban funds. And we did go out for public comment between October 27th and November 10th, and we received 9 comments. Those are in your packet on pages 22 to 28. Here's a brief sample of some of the comments that we received. They were generally in support. There are a few that were against. We do always recommend that you read the full verbatim comments that we received. Our public does get involved, and they are very thoughtful in their comments. We have shared these with the appropriate agencies as well. They will be included in the board packet for review before action. And I will stand here for any questions about these amendments to Communities in Motion as well as the transportation improvement programs.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions and discussions on these items? I have one on well, first I want to say again, congratulations to ACHD on a build grant. That is huge. I think that's a success, not only for ACHD, but for the entire Treasure Valley. You're really putting us on the map and you're doing great work over there. So kudos to you. Spread some of that energy over to Nampa for our next meeting. My question is on the STARS agreement on the State Highway 69 widening on reducing. So if I remember correctly, Costco, or are we allowed, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Okay, I was like, oh no. The development is coming in on the southeast corner at Lake Hazel in Columbia. Does the traffic study just show major traffic impacts to the south and not people coming from Meridian North? Like I could see scaling it down to Amity, but what was the driving force for not having it between Amity and Lake Hazel?
Madam Chair, Aaron Bogus with ITD. So I liked what Gus said there a minute ago, living and breathing document of community's motion. I think similar fashion, when we went to the board in January, we went to them with the idea of we're ready to partner with Brighton on these improvements. Since then, as we've gotten into the details, I think the idea when we added the project to the STIP, it was, a big wish we could accomplish all that work. As they've tied costs down and looked at that further, they discovered they can't go that far north. So I think the other thing that capped it is the $35 million ceiling. They don't want to get too close to that. They don't want to overspend. So this was more of a logical termini that they would end here. The idea, though, is that they would still spend up to the 35 million, but as shown on that diagram, the blue is what's going to be constructed. The pieces to the north, there is a phase 3. We could readjust the limits and design those features in, and then potentially others would come forward for other STARS agreements to make the rest of the improvements along the corridor.
Thank you for that clarification, Aaron. Follow up on that. The box is drawn over, looks like a bridge of some sort. Is that really a river crossing or a water crossing of some sort? Will the grant also go up above the bridge, or the agreement include the bridge?
Yes. That's a canal structure. I forget the name, but yes.
Thank you. Any additional questions? We're going to get the recommended motion on. There we go.
Sorry about that. Your resolutions are on pages 15 to 21. I apologize.
Yeah, it's all memoed out. It just, you need
Dan,
to review
you are
it. Josh
unmuted.
needs to sign it and move it along.
All right. There are no additional questions. I will stand for a motion. Don't be shy.
Madam Chair,
I
this is
would
Nicole.
move. Oh, Nicole's going to do it.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I move that RTAC recommends Compass Board of Directors the adoption of resolutions amending this Communities in Motion 2050 in the fiscal year 25 to 31 and 26 to 32 tips as presented.
Amazing.
I will
Thank you,
second.
Nicole. We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Awesome.
you very
Action
much.
5C is recommend approval of the Compass Carbon Reduction Strategy. This is an exciting one, Hunter. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be presenting today with Aaron Berger with DKS Associates. He's online. You can thank ITD for that. He's out supporting some of their open houses out on the east side of the state. So I'll kick it off here. But today, the purpose of this presentation is to recommend the approval to the Compass Board of Directors of the Compass Carbon Reduction Strategy. I'll go into some of the detail on the background and the purpose of why we did this strategy. and a little bit about the federal carbon reduction program and funds. And then Aaron will talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement we did with the work group put together for this strategy, talk about the work we did doing some baselining or kind of putting carbon emissions into the context of the Treasure Valley, looking at how does transportation fit into overall carbon emissions and what types of modes of travel contribute most to that within that realm. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the goals, objectives, and performance measures for our strategy. These were really guided by that stakeholder work group. Also, we really didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So you'll probably be familiar with a lot of these goals and objectives from Communities in Motion 2055, which were adopted by the board, I think, earlier this year. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we evaluated the different types of eligible projects under the program to best select the projects that would have the biggest impact in our area. And so we built a tool to do that. It's really a flexible tool to evaluate all different types of projects because the eligibility for projects is so broad. So I'll do a little demonstration on that and share that with you all. You should have a link on page 29 if you want to start playing around in it now, those online. And then talk about how we're going to use it and what's next. So a little bit of background. Carbon reduction program was established through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It is a formula fund, meaning it comes directly to the state and then allocated by ITD across the state. All states were required to have a carbon reduction strategy per this program. So the ITD, I believe, wrapped theirs up at the end of 2024. Compass, we identified this need kind of early on with IJA, but it just wasn't at the top of the priority projects. We had several, there was a lot in that bill. So this wasn't necessarily a number one priority. So we're a little bit late in the bill on this one, but we're also waiting on ITD to get a carbon reduction strategy as well. And then we had some funding issues. So relate to the program, but I'll talk a little bit about how the work we did can move forward through Communities in Motion 2055 and work that you all are doing today. So the program was about $6.5 billion over 5 years. I said we got 1 year left. I think a lot of those funds are probably spoken for at this point, but there may be some more. But $47 million over the 5 years of the bill came to Idaho. The TMA, the Transportation Management Area, the Boise urban area, is allocated around just under $1.5 million per year through the program, which is programmed through Compass at our discretion and coordination with our partners. The remaining funds of the program are allocated per population numbers through the large urban, small urban, and rural jurisdictions, and those projects will be developed in coordination with ITD and Compass for programming. So the strategy, the key tasks of this project were, number one, engage you all, work with you all through this. Again, the baseline emissions, how does carbon emissions, how do they fit in the Treasure Valley? How does transportation contribute to the overall carbon emissions? And then what types of travel are we seeing within that maybe contribute more carbon? So that helped us focus in on specific types of behaviors we were looking at with our tool. Developed goals, objectives, and performance measures. Aaron will talk a little bit about that. And then again, how we assess the different types of projects with the tool, and then a little bit about moving forward. With that, I'll turn it over to Aaron. He's going to be online and he's going to be having me change slides, but I'll be doing a demo at the end and talk about how we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Hunter. Can everybody hear me okay?
Gotcha.
Sounds good. All right, so this is just looking at our overall schedule for the project and kind of those key stakeholder committee check-in points. First one we had was back in April of this year, and that check-in focused on really the purpose of the Compass CRS. We reviewed those regional baseline emissions measures, and then we also introduced goals, objectives, and performance measures. So that was the focus of that first check-in. We checked in with RTAC with you all in April as well. And then in June, we had our second stakeholder work session, and we're at the point of developing some scenarios of potential projects that could reduce carbon emissions and advance towards some of those CIM goals. So at this meeting, we focused on some preliminary project and strategy evaluation results, and then we refined those goals, objectives, and performance measures. And then our third stakeholder work session was in August 22nd of this year. We've focused that meeting on review of our evaluation results for the carbon reduction project strategies throughout the region, and then also looked at some of the scoring outputs from the carbon reduction strategy project evaluation toolkit that we'll be talking about a little bit more. Right, Hunter, we can move to the next slide. So looking at our baseline emissions, and you've seen this slide before, we shared this with our tech back in April. This really is just focused on some of the key emissions results we saw from the National Emissions Inventory, NEI, comparing Canyon and Ada County to the state of Idaho, and then also to the country as a whole. And the trend that this highlights that we emphasized too was, as a state, Idaho sees a higher percentage of emissions from trucks than the nation does. Canyon and Ada County are actually much more in line with the national numbers than the statewide numbers, which is to be expected as the two more urban counties of the state. And then on the personal vehicle side, Canyon and Ada County also more closely aligned, as you'd expect, with the national numbers. Transit numbers are obviously lower. Again, lower number of transit services in Idaho as a whole compared to the nationwide numbers is the reason for that. So based on that helped guide some of our emissions reduction emphasis within this effort towards focusing for, especially when you're thinking about areas within the TMA, focusing on reducing SOV emissions. Next slide, Hunter. So onto our goals, objectives, and performance measures. We base this off, as Hunter said, rather than reinvent the wheel, we base this off of the Compass Communities in Motion 2055 goals and objectives. Use these as the CRS goals and objectives. And then our performance measures were selected based on the advancement, the kind of three main criteria, like a measure that indicates advancement towards a Communities in Motion 2055 objective, or a measure that could be readily quantified from tools available to Compass, including this vision eval model, which we'll touch on briefly, that we developed to support this CRS. And then a measure that's indicative of some form of reduced carbon emissions, reflecting the overarching goal of the CRP. All right, next slide, Hunter. So moving into our carbon reduction strategy assessment and evaluation, there were kind of three components to this. The first piece was this multimodal assessment. So we developed it's called a vision eval model for the Compass area. This is a scenario planning tool capable of estimating multimodal performance metrics at, if you want a geographic, I guess, description of it, it's about the census block group level of geography. Census block groups are areas that roughly have a population of 1,000 people. So we developed and ran 4 future year 2050 scenarios in this tool. One was a baseline future scenario, which is really just kind of the business as usual. It included all funded projects, currently funded projects, and projects with anticipated funding in the Compass 2050 CIM. Then we had three additional scenarios. One was kind of a fully built out aspirational walking and biking network system. Another was an aspirational transit system, included all the unfunded future transit projects from the CIM, as well as some additional transit connections just to see what would happen if we fully connected the region with transit. Then we did a built out multimodal scenario, which was really the first 2 scenarios, built out bike walk and built out transit, and combined them. So with the results of these scenarios, we were able to link the anticipated or the aspirational infrastructure improvements to vision eval performance metrics. And the result of this was that we were able to create unit benefits by geography for the region. And Hunter, you want to switch to the next slide? There's a map here showing kind of a sample of what that looked like for one particular mode. This is looking at bike trip potential across the region based on miles of new infrastructure added. So that's kind of that unit rate of benefit we're showing. These maps are available in the report that's included in the agenda package. So you can look at it for the different modes of travel, but this is just a sample of what those results look like. And next slide, Hunter. In addition to the multimodal analysis, we also focused on the transportation systems management and operations and intelligent transportation systems, so your TSMO and ITS projects. For these projects, we did more of a qualitative assessment. We used industry best practices and referenced information from the FHWA top SPC. It's a tool for estimating benefit cost for TSMO and ITS projects. And we developed a qualitative project evaluation matrix. I'm a bullet ahead, so wait to switch slides. I'll show you a sample of that in a second. We also incorporated methodology from the ACHD livable community procedures for bicycle and pedestrian level of traffic stress, and then also reference some of the highway safety manual crash modification factors to qualitatively assess whether a project could provide safety benefits. And Hunter, if you go to the next slide, will show us this is a sample, or this is kind of a screenshot of that qualitative TSMO and ITS project evaluation matrix. You can see project categories, project types, and then some scoring, scored from 0 to 2, 2 being the highest score, under different performance measures that we'd identified. So that's a sample of that matrix. And then finally, the last step of the CRS assessment and evaluation, we moved into this project evaluation piece. So we incorporated the quantitative multimodal assessment data from that Vision Eval tool, and then the qualitative evaluation matrix for the TSMO and ITS projects, as well as those other LTS and safety performance metrics. And we created the CRS project evaluation toolkit. So the toolkit provides project-specific performance metrics, including quantified multimodal measures. We also developed a matrix of scoring criteria for the performance metrics intended to identify projects that best represent local and regional CRP goals. And then we refined this scoring criteria based on the sample project evaluation results and stakeholder feedback and public feedback from the CIM 2055 Move What Matters survey. Go to the next slide. It shows us that shows us a sample of what this scoring matrix looked like. As you can see, for the different goals and objectives of the CIM 2055, you can see our performance measures highlighted in the third column, and then the goal weighting, which was again adjusted based off of the input from the survey and stakeholders, and also mainly from the stakeholders in the survey. And then at the bottom there, you see that CRP goal. That one is specific really to this program. That was related to performance measures that directly reflected emissions reductions. So next slide. So all that, after we completed the evaluation matrix, we were ready to start testing some sample projects. So we had the stakeholder group provided us with a list of projects from across the region, and we took those and ran them through our toolkit. And I apologize, I lost my screen. And that provided us with a sense of how the tool was reacting to different projects. That also actually helped feed into some of our weighting and performance measure thresholds that we used for how we got to score the different scores for each category. And then the next slide shows a sample of what some of those outputs look like. So you can see here, and this is provided also in some of the appendices to the report, but there's a list of projects on the top, kind of highlighted in the pink there. And then this is a look at how those projects performed. These are the actual performance metrics. So the numbers there, for example, if you look at that third row where it says increase in walk trips, and I apologize, it's kind of small text, but you can see, 14 walk trips added on that Garrity Boulevard side path. That would be daily walk trips anticipated added by the project. So that gives you an idea of kind of what performance measures we were able to quantify for some of these projects. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it back over to Hunter, and he's going to share how we took this tool and moved it onto the internet, and then he's going to run through some samples showing how it works.
Yeah, I'll wrap up with this. Oh, excuse me, that was loud. I'll wrap up with this final slide, and then I'll do a demonstration of the tool. I know that's a lot of information and it's a big matrix, but I think we cleaned it up pretty nice and made it pretty simple to use. So I'll show that in just a second. But so moving forward with this strategy, we created this to be a flexible tool that addresses a broad range of projects. Should this program move on, we'll continue to use this tool to evaluate our projects and program our projects through their carbon reduction strategy. I don't know if that's likely, but moving forward, we have something in place now. We have a capability that we didn't have before. We're able to kind of model or anticipate benefits of these non-capacity type projects, like walking, biking, and transit type things. So it's a new capability we have. I don't know if it's perfect, but it's something that we didn't have before, something you all can use for your planning processes, and something that we'll use internally. I think we intentionally built it off the CIM 2055 goals, so this tool can live in perpetuity through this next long-range transportation plan. So that was really the big intent, and the thing I wanted to hammer home is that it's not just about the carbon reduction program. This is about our regional transportation needs and goals. So with that, I'll go on the internets and show you the tool. Let's see here. Okay. Is everyone online seeing my screen here of the internet, the web? Okay. I'll take that as yes. Okay. So this is the landing page for the dashboard. For your reference, the potential maps that Aaron had mentioned of the bike, walk, and transit are available as kind of a side tab. You can come in here and see potential transit, walk, and bike trips for different geographies in the area based off the outputs from the vision eval model. So that can help you kind of target and focus in on specific areas. You can hide that and get to the toolkit part or the scoring matrix part here. So I'm going to do a demonstration project of the Riddenbaugh Canal project here. It's over Maple Grove to Milwaukee. It's a new multi-use pathway. So what I do is come in here. I would say, does your project improve pedestrian facilities? Yep. Does your project improve bicycle facilities? Because it's a multi-use pathway? Yep. Is it a TISMO or operations project? No. Is it safety? Yes, it's one of the things in our regional safety action plan, multi-use, and it's an off-network pathway, so we can say it's a safety improvement. Does it improve safety on an unreliable or congested corridor? No, it's an off-system thing. But and then we could say how much, what's the length of the project here? So I think we put in like 2,800 feet for a pedestrian facility. We'll say that it's moving to a level of stress of, is it Tom, is one the good? Yeah. Okay. So it's improving by 2. So it's moving up 2 levels. We'll say it's also 2,800 feet of bike path, and that's going to be a bike level of stress 1. So it's moving it up from a 2 to or a 3, 2 or a 3 to a 1. This is assumptions we made here. So from those inputs, we're able to see these different performance measures where you can see the projected bike trips per day in 2050 would be around 70. The new walk trips per day would be around 30 plus. And then you can see how many vehicle miles traveled are reduced by shifting those trips to different modes, as well as some cost reduction savings per person on vehicle wear and tear and all the ownership costs. And then you're also able to see how many tons of carbon dioxide equivalents are reduced by 2050. So pretty simple when that all goes into the matrix. And then at the top, you can see how you scored against all the different goals and objectives of the plan, and it comes up kind of with a cumulative score for your project. You can dig a little deeper to see how your project scored by clicking down this drop down and see where you got points, which performance measures you scored for, and what threshold you scored. So a 0 or nothing would be it didn't touch that performance measure. A 1 would be sort of impacted that, and a 2 would be a good impact on the different performance measures. And then you can also see more information about the vision eval model outputs for the zones you've selected. I didn't show you that. Actually, you can go in here and you can select the zone for your project and add those as you're building it out or analyzing it. So you choose all the zones where your project covers, and then you're able to come in here and see some more information, about the vision eval model outputs. I'm missing that here. Oh, here we go. So what the vision eval model said about these zones with potential bike, transit, and walk trips in 2050. So that's, a lot of that technical stuff wrapped into, I think, is a pretty easy, quick interface to use. That will be made available as soon as we post the plan, and the plan strategy is adopted on our website for you all to browse. You have a link now to start playing around in it. So I encourage you all to do so. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Hunter. It was a lot of data.
Very technical.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
So Hunter, was that a good project or not? Like a 6.7, like what's the scale are we talking about? And how would you interpret that number at the end?
Yeah, I would say that was one of the top ones that we evaluated, the Red and Bucknell project. Yeah. Yeah, there's in the strategy, you can see how the different projects scored out. The samples that we used and kind of where they fell. And as Aaron mentioned, we used that range to kind of figure how we were falling out and adjust some of our weighting and scoring and making sure we weren't like duplicating or overcounting things. And so that was kind of where we broke the tool by actually putting real world type projects into it.
And I'll add to that too. I think originally our scoring was set to the maximum you could get would be 10. That changed a little bit once we put some of those goal weightings in. So I believe the maximum is like 8.7 or something range. So that was the highest scoring, I'd say, in the real project. We did test some projects that were combinations of strategies, and those ones always score really well. So if you're able to combine some TSMO, transit, and active transportation all into one project, those are going to score really well. This tool kind of reflects those co-benefits.
Hunter, I don't have a question per se, but I do have feedback. I think this tool could have some good applications on grant applications as well, especially on like the cost savings and things like that. It might be something great if it could be added into the Compass newsletter when the grants come out, saying like, hey, here's again the toolbox of things that Compass provides to all of its customers, and like this is a great one to use on XYZ grant.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great point. And that's something I failed to mention is, yeah, I think this can be used definitely for some of those, whatever the next iteration of the next transportation bill kind of is moving forward. It might not be called carbon reduction. It might be something else kind of encouraging multimodal travel. And so we can use it kind of in the next life of the bill and other grant opportunities as well for supporting data and information that we have. So thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions for Hunter or Aaron?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Aaron, Hunter, thank you again for the really comprehensive effort here. I think it was a lot of work, both understanding ITD's CRS and interpreting that for the TMA as well. I'm intensely grateful for the opportunity to be able to work alongside you on that. My question was, going forward, are you collecting the data on the projects that we score? Is that something that Compass is looking at, or knowing that this is a tool that we might be just fiddling around with and could produce any number of results may not necessarily be relevant?
Thank you, Alex. Madam Chair. So you're asking, are we wrapping these scores? Are we using these in like the TIP or CIM or this and that, or?
Yeah, well, just for any projects that we score in the future, will they be relevant to Compass's data at all?
Yeah, I think we just went through a TIP scoring process. I think the next round of that, where we're working with you all, will be bringing this tool in and seeing how we can help support that with your project selection and programming. It might not be in the form of the total score, but maybe some of the metrics that come from the tool, I think, are the most valuable thing. Maybe we won't be just looking at the carbon reduction program, but some of those metrics like the mode shift, like the potential walk, bike, VMT type things, we could probably move forward into our TIP scoring and evaluation process.
Thank you.
Thanks. With that, I'll stand for a motion. I think that's your job, but I took it.
Okay, you're good. I'll go ahead and I would love to make the motion that RTAC recommend the Compass Board of Directors approve the Compass carbon reduction strategy.
Madam Chair, I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good job, guys. Item 6A is a status report for coordinated regional waterway pathway plan with Alexa. Good morning. Ooh, I haven't been up here in a while. Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of RTAC. I'm Alexa Reutman and I'm assistant planner here at Compass. I do want to make a quick note that Brooke is here with me today from Kittleson and Associates. I've clerical error on my behalf. She is not on the agenda, so I just wanted to let you know she is presenting with me today as well. All right. All right, so this is an information item for you all on the Compass Coordinated Regional Waterway Pathway Plan. To get into the agenda today, we'll be talking about the project overview, stakeholder outreach, identification of gaps and opportunities in our system, and then any questions and next steps. Working with me is Gus as well from Compass. You've heard from him earlier, as well as Brooke Green and some other folks at Kittleson who are not on the screen. All right, so beyond what you see written on the slide, building from Communities in Motion 2050 and working toward Communities in Motion 2055, this went beyond in the fact that RTAC recommended this plan for funding to the Compass Board in 2021, as well as elements of this plan were included in a member agency request form submitted by the City of Meridian, which really demonstrated a clear regional need. During the RFP development process, I met with many of you on RTAC, as well as outside advocates as well, to gather input about the city's needs and key considerations to include. And that purpose, I think, is really
exampled here is to develop a connected, accessible, and historically informed non-motorized transportation network along the regional waterways. This includes not just canals and irrigation ditches, but also rivers and streams, if that so benefits the network, as well as I think some of the main things that we heard, and kind of getting back to that historically informed aspect, is relationship building on what you all have already done, because a lot of you have had great success in building pathways along irrigation and canals and other waterways, and to help with providing design templates and policy templates that can help our smaller communities as they go forward in this process, as well as project recommendations, identifying those areas that connect a greater transportation network, active transportation network. Yeah, so from that, our goals align closely with the stated purpose that I just mentioned and are designed to directly support it, from identifying opportunities to expand the existing system to facilitating transparent and evidence-based decision-making with our stakeholders and data, to ensuring a strong regional voice grounded in our interagency coordination and protecting our value environmental assets. And I believe we also had a slight edit here for 2055, not 2050 Communities in Motion goals and objectives, but we used our goals and objectives that you'll see in the long range transportation plan as well to guide this study. Our work group is quite extensive. I'm really glad about that. A lot of you I see here are part of our work group, and really just making sure that we get your knowledge and experience bring it into the fold as we continue to build this out, and has been really helpful in providing feedback and opportunities and highlighting successes. So just want to say thank you to the work group for showing up and being so helpful. And this is our schedule on where we're at. We have completed 2 work group meetings, and I'll let Brooke go into the stakeholder aspect here, but we have been also meeting with both irrigation and canal districts, and a little bit some highway districts as well. And I'll let her get into that, like I just said, but wanted to make sure that it's highlighted that we have been meeting since early October with one-on-one meetings with those folks, as well as the 2 meetings we've had with the work group. All right, and I will pass it off to Brooke.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be before you. For the record, Brooke Green with Kittleson Associates. I'm super excited to be able to work on this project, as certainly I see the value in expanding our network and expanding not only our network as it applies to the roads, but also the trails and the pathways along our waterways and our canals, something certainly many of your communities have been working on for some time. I do want to just briefly talk about our stakeholder outreach. As Alexa highlighted, this has certainly been an effort that we've been undertaking for several months now. And certainly why it's incredibly important is to understand not only the hesitation, but some of the limitations. And these one-on-one engagements gives us the opportunity to do that. Stakeholder outreach, our purpose really was to go back to identifying that trust. What does that trust look like for local agencies and irrigation organizations? Certainly engaging with them. Irrigation districts has been our focus. And the reason being is our irrigation districts do not have to work with us. They're certainly one of the strongest organizations in the state of Idaho, and certainly engaging with them early on and understanding some of their hesitations and certainly understanding some of their limitations is incredibly important for this plan. We wanted to gather the insights on existing successes, existing challenges, and barriers to implementation and related information. That barriers doesn't just apply to the irrigation districts themselves, but maybe with some of the communities or the highway districts. We also wanted to identify some of the successes. Some highway districts have had a really great success working with them. Some of the cities have had success, and we wanted to be able to capture that as we go forward with this plan. We wanted to also identify key issues as they pertain to policy and designs. As many of these communities that you guys represent have been working with these irrigation districts, you've already established some good processes. We want to capture that. More importantly, we want to capture that for some of the member organizations who may not already have a robust approach to working with irrigation districts and expanding their network. And we wanted to identify gaps and opportunities in the system. While there's certainly a lot of pathways in some of our communities, that's not the case elsewhere. And so we wanted to identify, is there an opportunity for regional connections, but is there also opportunities for new connections and new pathways in some of our other communities? Stakeholder outreach, you're going to see we are focusing primarily with our irrigation districts currently. Our irrigation organizations that we've met with thus far: Boise Board of Project Controls, Pioneer Irrigation District, Nampa and Meridian, Farmers Cooperative Ditch, Settlers, our highway districts, Nampa Highway District, Canyon County Highway District, and most recently, and I believe really important, was meeting with the Idaho Water Users Association of Idaho. You're going to note there the Settlers Irrigation District is starred. While we reached out to them, they weren't very eager to work with us or to meet with us, but we really wanted to highlight we are reaching out to several of these irrigation districts. We're also limited. There are 66 irrigation districts in Ada and Canyon County. Our scope of work only applies to meeting with 10 of them. And so we wanted to really highlight, we did attempt to meet with Settlers. They just chose not to meet with us. Something else that we're doing that we want to broaden our outreach is we are going to send out a survey. Met with Idaho Users Waters Association. They're going to send it out on our behalf to their member organizations, and hopefully we'll be able to solicit some additional feedback. What are some of our key findings in these outreach efforts? Some irrigation organizations are open to pathways. They are not too hesitant. They see a value in it. Some major concerns, and you can already anticipate several of these. It's pathways along waterways. It's the maintenance, the vandalism. I want to just pause briefly on the maintenance piece. This is actually one of the largest issues that they're highlighting, partly because if they're working with the city, they want to ensure that their maintenance needs are met adjacent to their canal pathways, but they also highlight it as an issue with HOAs. So when they go into these development agreements with these HOAs to have these pathways along their facilities, what they are finding out is HOAs are not necessarily adhering to what they agreed to, and thus the irrigation districts are having to go back there after the fact and mitigate and address some of the maintenance issues that the HOAs are supposed to be taking care of. However, there is a growing concern and amongst irrigation districts to consider pathways. One of those considerations is they're able to shift the costs associated with maintenance to the partner agency, whether it be the city or the HOA. That has actually been something brought up in these irrigation conversations, in these conversations we're having with these irrigation districts, is they're starting to recognize there might be a value to partnering because they can shift that burden off and allows them to just focus on the other side. One of the things that we're finding, another key finding, they're interested if there's two roads adjacent to the canal or two pathways or two access points. Not too many of them, or I wouldn't say none of them, said they're really interested in it if there's only one. Partly it's because they highlighted if they get out there to do maintenance, some of the concerns that they're running into is the general public. The general public doesn't like to be kicked off a pathway when the irrigation district needs to get in there and do their maintenance. And they're finding a lot of the general public are actually not so nice to their employees as a result of that while they're out there doing the work, because it's their space. They want to be able to walk their dogs. Some of the other issues that they're finding is what they can leave behind. They're not required to remove some of the debris out of their facilities, and thus the general public are not thrilled to have that debris sitting next to their pathways. But I do want to say that several of them are starting to come around. It goes back to that relationship piece, and why it's so important we're having these conversations is relationships matter. And they're eager to have these conversations, invite us into their offices, and some of them are still really hesitant. But the Idaho Waters Users Association did highlight in the interview we had with them, this is a conversation that they brought to their members about 3 years ago. And they referenced an Arizona project where there was a lot of success. And it's so important that that organization is having these conversations, because if they're starting to have the conversations, us coming from behind and also engaging with these irrigation districts, it sets us up for a little bit more success. Next steps for stakeholder outreach, as I highlighted, we have several more interviews in the next few weeks that we're going to be conducting. I highlighted earlier, we're going to release that survey, and the hope is that that survey coming from the Idaho Waters User Association might generate a little bit more response. Paul was he's the executive director. He was great to interview. He too looked at this as an opportunity for some of them, but he also did highlight that some are just not eager to come to the table regarding pathways. Identification of gaps and opportunities in the system. So we recently had a meeting with our work group. It was our second of our 4 meetings that we're having with this group. Many of you are on it. If you're not on it and you're interested, certainly let us know. It is quite the list. But we did take forward our first approach to prioritizing these canal pathways. We developed a GIS-based system for prioritizing potential pathways based on gaps and opportunities in the system. We wanted to use the existing waterways, canal pathways as a basis for potential pathways. This includes criteria that supports the visions and the goals. And most importantly, we wanted to really identify that low-hanging fruit. While you're going to see here in a moment, there's a lot of opportunities. We need to identify what is probably the most feasible that your member organizations can focus their attention on. Make sure I didn't click too far. I did click too far. Prioritization criteria, there's maximum points possible of 10. Now, I do want to highlight that this is just our draft. We did take it to the work group and did receive some really good feedback. So in the next coming weeks, we may be adjusting this based off that feedback. The first one is irrigation districts' interest in creating accessible pathways for the public along their waterways. If they're not interested, we certainly didn't want to give them points, because we want to ensure that we have feasible projects moving forward. We want your member organizations, your communities to focus where they can spend their time and not have to be up against somebody who's just not interested in coming to the table for a conversation. So we did do 2 points for those who were eager to have the conversation or at least considering it, 0 points for those who didn't necessarily even want to engage. Existing and proposed connections within the regional routes. We had 2 points for existing to existing facilities. We had 1 point for existing to proposed facilities and proposed to proposed facilities. Again, it's about that low hanging fruit. Equitable distribution, essential destinations. This is actually one where we got some great feedback from the city of Boise and some other work group members. And it's right now, as it stands, it's the essential destinations of schools, libraries, parks, open spaces, and water within a half a mile. 2 points for 2+ destinations, 1 point for 1, and 0 points for 0 destinations. Something we're going to look at is also that on-street network. We recognize that canals, traverse several throughout our communities. They cross over many of our roadways. We want to highlight where they connect to an existing facility on the roadway to help folks navigate from point A to point B. Communities in Motion Regional Equity Index, highest 25%. The index score got 2 points. The next 25% was 1 point, and then 0 points, it didn't apply. Supports existing planning efforts. Many of your communities are already jumping on board and exploring opportunities to expand pathways along your waterways. So we really wanted to highlight here your efforts in doing so. So you have got 1 point for identified in a previous plan, and then 0 points for not identifying in a plan. And then lastly, cross-jurisdictional alignment. Again, this is one that we received a lot of input from the work group, and so we may adjust this a little bit. First, 1 point was only in one jurisdiction. Again, it was about that ease of implementation, that low-hanging fruit. If it's in one jurisdiction, chances are they're not having to work across jurisdictional boundaries. Therefore, it might be easier. And then 0 points for, only 1 and then 0 points for, I cannot read that. 1+ jurisdiction. So essentially, if you're going across 2 jurisdictions, chances are it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Want to highlight, this is our first draft at our prioritization efforts. Doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be what you guys see coming back in a couple months. The work group's input is incredibly important. We did get some feedback, so we're going to go back to the drawing table on a few of these. And then when we come before you again in the future, hopefully you'll see those modifications. This is what it looks like when applied to the map. Somebody highlighted it looks like spaghetti, and certainly it does, but it also highlights how many opportunities exist in the system. So we wanted to whittle that down. Our goal is to identify the top 20 projects that is feasible among your member organizations to implement. You're going to see in purple, those are the highest priorities. Those are the ones based off of existing plans, connectivity, jurisdiction, equity index. Those are the ones that we've identified as the highest priority as of now in this first draft. Now that's going to change. You're also going to note that several of those are in the urban environment. Naturally, we have opportunities in our urban environments to expand our connectivity. We recognize that. And then, of course, you see in the pink, those are the mid-level priorities, and the low priorities are the ones that you see there in orange. This is the first draft. We will modify this based off of the feedback from the work group. We'll come back before you. If you would like to see this or toy around with it a little bit, we can send you that link. But many of your communities are already represented on the work group, so they're certainly playing and toying around with it right now. We anticipate additional feedback from them here in the coming weeks. Next steps and questions. We're going to refine the prioritization criteria based off of that feedback of the recent working group that just met last week. Upcoming stakeholder outreach findings. We hope to hear back from many of those who participate in the survey. I'm eager to hear what some of the other irrigation districts are doing, but also eager to hear, as we go through this analysis and we look statewide, other communities are having some significant successes, and those successes are funneling up to the Idaho Users Association, and we're hearing about it. So the fact that we're going to send a survey through an organization that is well respected in the state, hopefully is going to generate some more interest and participation from some of these irrigation districts in Ada and Canyon County. And lastly, our next steps is identify the draft. It's the top 20 pathway projects. We anticipate our work group meeting will be meeting again in the month of January. So we'll be taking this feedback to them. Hopefully we'll be able to identify those 20 pathway projects. As I mentioned earlier, our focus right now is with the irrigation districts. Because relationships matter, having those conversations now matter. These irrigation districts, we want to invite them, have them participate. And so it's potentially in one of the work group meetings, we will be inviting them to participate when we have the findings in hopes that they'll be a little bit more engaged moving forward. But I will say the promising piece of all of this is that some of these irrigation districts are starting to recognize value in allowing pathways next to their facilities. And partly it's because they're able to shift that buck a little bit more, the cost associated with maintenance, and they're seeing that as beneficial to their organizations. With that being said, that concludes my presentation. Alexa and I will stand for questions.
Jacob Quall, City of Parma. Quick question. In your surveys with those irrigation districts, was maintenance versus liability or liability brought up at all?
Absolutely. So maintenance, and I didn't highlight that earlier. Maintenance, liability is certainly the number one. We just met with the Boise project. They represent, I want to say 4 to 5 irrigation districts. They have a standing policy right now that they will not allow pathways next to their facilities. And partly it's because of the liability. It was evident in the conversation that we had with them. They're really concerned about kids getting into their facilities and then not being able to get out. However, we have seen, and I'm local, so I'm in the same community as many of you, and I've seen successful implementations of pathways along canals where they have mitigated those liabilities, whether it be fencing. What we did hear from those irrigation districts regarding potential of fencing, they need to get to their facilities 24/7 and not have something as a barrier. And so therefore fencing isn't really an option. We hope, however, through these conversations and the more irrigation districts that actually start to consider pathways next to their facilities, we're hoping that the others will also come along. That's why we're spending a lot of time with the irrigation districts where there has been success, because we want these other irrigation districts to say, well, X, Y, and Z has figured it out and look what they're doing. And they've been able to, pass the buck and the cost off to someone else.
So initially I was thinking like rodent control, but also canal breaches where it floods out a subdivision or other infrastructure. Maybe we need to do that offline, but that's a concern that I've heard across the state from other entities similar to irrigation districts and ditch canal districts. When there is a trail along those, it can be a concern, I guess, if there's development next to it. And then, it's like the canal breaching and flooding out somebody's basement. Who takes the liability of that? I think there was a recent case down here in the valley somewhere where canal and city fought on who would take the liability of that issue. Does that make sense?
Thank you. And actually, we had not heard that concern. And so definitely want to take it offline and engage with you a little bit more. That would be some really good feedback to include in our analysis.
Any other questions for Brooke or Alexa?
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
you mentioned waterways within a half a mile as a destination. What do you mean by that?
So we're looking towards, and actually it would be your greenbelt facilities or your STAR facilities where there's existing pathways. Those locations would be prioritized higher.
Brooke, thank you for this presentation, and Alexa as well. This project actually was not on my radar, so I'm trying to swallow my disappointment that City of Nampa has not been involved in any of these stakeholder outreaches, especially as I see both of the highway districts, at least in our area of impact, have been contacted, and typically, at least our highway districts are more interested in a rural cross-section and a rural field, so that you don't see a lot of emphasis on pathways and multimodal and pedestrian facilities. I didn't see any mention to literature surveys for alignment with master plans for the cities. Has that been done, or did you guys just prioritize a bunch of things that may not align with the city's vision?
Thank you for the question. For Nampa, we did reach out to Nampa, and I'm looking to see Alexa.
So City of Nampa is a part of our work group list. So what you saw as the outreach were one-on-one conversations that we thought were really important to get, because we get you all here at our TAC or through our work group meetings like active transportation work group or public transportation work group. However, we don't get the opportunity to have the time to go one-on-one with irrigation and canal companies. So the work group is separate from that one-on-one stakeholder meeting. So apologies if that didn't make sense, Madam Chair. Yeah. So with that, the original, through the RFP, we met before as I was building the RFP, I met with City of Meridian, Boise, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember my list, Bureau of Reclamations, and I also brought this to the Active Transportation Work Group, which City of Nampa sits on. And it was really more about coming to the table around where are we going to make connections through the canals, not necessarily, how do I say this? So can you repeat your question again so I make sure I respond?
I think you answered it fully.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so we are basing it off of, we have used our objectives, our goals and objectives, and then through the policy analysis, which we are pulling from the city of all of our jurisdictions, if it's specific to a pathway or active transportation. So the policy analysis is really pulling in what you all cities are doing. And that is the way that we're pulling in what the work that you have been building on. Does that answer?
Yep.
Okay.
Follow up for the working group. Is the facts committee part of that working group as well, or have they been involved in the conversations? They have definitive opinions as well.
Yeah. So we have, so Nampa the Nampa Bike Advisory Group. I believe her name is Larita. I forgot her last name. Apologies. And then we have an ACHD BAC member as also part of the advocate group for the work group. We've decided to kind of limit the advocates on that because we will be always presenting it to Active Transportation Group, the updates, the work group here that we have at Compass, in regards to the fact that there's so much sensitivity around the irrigation and canal companies. So we are bringing this to the Active Transportation Work Group, which FACTS sits on. And so we kind of felt that the bigger our work group gets, it could get a little overwhelming with feedback, and we're already picking up that feedback in our Compass work group. So we're trying to cross our T's and dot our I's when it comes to who's involved and making sure people are getting that information. But we did realize that we could probably expand this work group for waterway pathways to like 50, 60 people. So trying to keep it a little bit smaller. We did not invite specifically FACTS to this work group, but they will be informed through Active.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, to add to your question, so when we did meet with the irrigation district as pertaining specifically to Nampa, they highlighted that there's actually great success with the city of Nampa. One of the things we're also doing is we're evaluating all of the MOUs or memorandums of understandings that you may have with these irrigation districts. We're doing a policy analysis in addition to these outreach efforts. So that way we can figure out why is there so much success there, and can we duplicate that and capture what that is and share it with the rest of the member organizations here at Compass.
Thank you. Any other questions? This was really informative. Thank you guys very much. Running a little bit behind, so I apologize. Item 6B is share findings of the 2024 Congestion Management Annual Report for Hunter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to keep us moving along here. I got a lot of information to share with you today. I'm going to talk to you. I'm sure many of you have been part of the committee, have seen me come to you and present some of the findings from the congestion management report. I'm going to share some of that information with you all today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the congestion management process, which is kind of the overall federal requirement that we have as the MPO to conduct this type of analysis. Then I'm going to talk about the different ways that we measure congestion. And then I will talk about some of the highlights from 2024 with regards to how congested we were, what we saw with the analysis. Kind of remind you again what our congestion management strategies are, talking about how right now what that looks like with our TIP and how we're putting money into different strategies of congestion management, and then talk about how we're going to keep doing this. So a little bit about the congestion management process. As stated, it's a systemic, cyclical, regionally accepted approach for managing congestion. It provides up-to-date system on the current state of congestion in the region. It identifies methods for identifying congestion management needs, identifying strategies to mitigate congestion, and it defines a path towards implementing the strategies through the TIP and our long-range plan. And then there's really that feedback cycle that I'm sharing with you today. So at the end, I'll talk a little bit about how we're measuring implementation of congestion management strategies and how we're looking back and helping use that information to shape the congestion management process. So how are we measuring congestion? Well, we're watching you, essentially. Your cell phones are providing information to cell phone providers. They can get pings off the towers. They can triangulate your location, your speed, your direction, throw that all into a big database and provide a service to us where we can say what the average travel times are on the roadway for different roadway segments. So we can tell what it takes to get from an average from point A to point B on most of our roadways here. So I'll share that with you in just a second. But the ways that we measure congestion are in kind of these four different aspects. We look at intensity. So we use what's called travel time index, which is really the describes travel times on how they vary from the peak periods to the off-peak periods. So what are your travel speeds during congestion versus kind of driving through the middle of the night where there's nobody on the roads. How long is it lasting? Like, what are our peak hours? You know, it's really the AM and PM here. There's some midday stuff on some of our corridors that have heavy commercial activity. But then we also look at and measure peak hours of excessive delay, and that's like a per capita measure. So how much is each person kind of how many hours of congestion is each person experiencing on our roadways? We look at how extensive the traffic is, so how many miles are congested of our roadway or what percentage. And then we look at variability. So how reliable or how predictable are our travel times? You know, are you having to budget 30 extra minutes to get to work every morning type thing because you just don't know what traffic's going to look like, those types of measures. So talk a little bit about that more moving forward. But we use essentially two different data sets and we measure two different networks through our region. The tier one, what we call tier one, is our national highway system, including the interstate and state highway system. And that comes from a data set called the National Performance Measures Research Data Set, or NPMRDS. That is provided to us and made available to us through FHWA. And then for our tier two network, which is a lot of our arterials and collectors that are not on the national highway system, we use a third-party vendor called INRIX, who scrubs that data and cleans it up and provides it to us. And we're actually getting that through an ITD agreement. ITD has this data source available as well. So just a quick, before I get into some of the details, we have kind of 7 performance measures we look at each year and targets we've set for these different performance measures. And in 2024, we hit 4 of our 7 performance measures. The 3 on the right where we're not meeting our targets all relate to the interstate. So we looked at excessive days where the travel time was 30% more than average. We didn't meet our threshold there. Our reliability, or how predictable travel times are on the interstate, we did not meet our target there. And then the truck travel time reliability is pretty similar to the normal travel time reliability. It just uses a higher percentile threshold. So when it gets bad, is it really bad? And yeah, it is essentially. So how congested are we talking? So this is a little bit about intensity or the travel time index that I mentioned, the peak versus non-peak. So we've been monitoring this. I think we've had these data sets since 2016 or 2017, but I'll kind of just roll off the last 5 years, what we standardly do. So in 2024, about 22% or around 100 roadway miles of the tier 1 network experienced high or moderate congestion. So that's the state highways and interstate. It's the lowest it's been since COVID. Surprisingly, I think we've wrapped up some big capacity projects on the interstate and some of the state highways that are kind of relieving some of these bottlenecks that we were seeing. So pretty stable though over the last 5 years, as you can see. On our tier 2 network, relatively stable as well, with less percentage of miles highly or moderately congested in 2024 than 2023. Around 10% or 155 of those road miles experience high or moderate congestion. So that was looking at travel time index, or the intensity of traffic. And then we talked about a little bit about reliability and how we're not meeting some of those reliability measures. So this lays out 3 different reliability measures. The blue being that interstate reliability measure, you can see dropping off since 2022 over the last 2 years. And then you can see the gray line, that's the truck travel time reliability measure. Higher is worse, so that's trending up. But we are seeing some improvement on our non-interstate NHS reliability system. You can see from 2023 to 2024 where it was more reliable. So how do we fit in kind of the national picture? You know, everyone says traffic is relative to where you're at and what you've experienced. So I thought this was something interesting. I hadn't done this before, but the Texas A&M Transportation Institute throws out a mobility report every year where they're kind of using these big data sets to kind of create a national picture of what congestion looks like. So the bottom is our travel time index, or kind of the intensity of traffic, like how slow is our peak hours compared to free flow, and then reliability is on the y-axis there. So we might have a little less intense traffic than Salt Lake City or Reno, but we're less reliable. So that's kind of where we fit in. You can see Los Angeles kind of takes the cake. I don't know. Honolulu, I've done that one recently too. That's pretty wild. But yeah, there's Seattle and Portland. So some of our neighbor cities and peer cities, and then there's Nampa, and then Idaho Falls, and kind of on the other end of the spectrum from LA there. So that's kind of how we fit in the national picture with regards to congestion. So yeah, and also in the report, I include kind of this density map of where we are developing in relationship to where we're seeing congestion. So, you know, we've grown nearly 13% since 2020. Building permits were up in 2024 about 20%. We're building along corridors that are already congested. So just something to show and keep in mind that I don't think we're going to build our way out of congestion. So I think that'll lead me a little bit into what are our strategies a bit later here in the presentation. But always my favorite, the top 10s. I do this every year. You can see US 2026, Chinden taking the cake on the top there. The old usual suspect, State Highway 55, Eagle Road, the Flying Wise, no surprise there. And then a few others you can find in the report. I also do that for that tier 2 network. So kind of the more arterial and collectors. And actually it includes interstate ramps because that's not included in that NPM RDS data set. So Canyon County, Idaho Center Boulevard, Midland, and then some of the off ramps in the area. And then no big surprise, the Y interchange ramp there. And then State Highway 16 kind of down there at the bottom in Ada County, and several other ramps like the Eagle, Meridian, and 10-mile ramps. All flagging in Ada County. And then there's a graphic in here too where I try to show like what's the average commute look like? What is the commuter experience? So typical, the one we always look at is the Caldwell to Boise, Boise to Caldwell on the interstate. You can see in the morning if you're coming from Caldwell to Boise on the interstate, this isn't including the time it takes you to get to the interstate. You're looking at around 31 minutes, with around 9 minutes of that being attributed to congestion. You see that if you had no traffic, you could make it in about 22 minutes. So this chart lays out several of those different commutes along our state highway and interstate system. And this is again, I mentioned the reliability factor and the event days. So there was 37 weekdays where the commute on I-84 was 30% greater than the average in 2024. So you can see this in the report. And it just highlights there was some days where it was both ways. There were some ways where it was the AM or the PM peak. So I threw this calendar in the report, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now. Okay, to segue into that, I think Nicole's presentation talking about commuter ride is a good example of one of the different strategies we have to mitigate congestion. And that really falls in that transportation demand management bucket of strategies. Is, you know, how do we increase person throughput and reduce vehicles, and you know, that's changing those signal occupancy trip behaviors by things like van pooling, changing like the carbon reduction strategy, talking about shifting modes to walking and biking. We talked a little bit about the transportation systems management and operations and intelligent transportation systems. So these are technologies and strategies to improve the flow of operations and efficiencies on our interstate. Things like the Traffic Management Center, ACHD, has set up some signal timing technologies that NAMPA is starting to roll out. Things like that we can do to make our system more efficient. Transit is a great way to shift that single occupancy trip behavior and move more people through our system and reduce the number of cars on our roadway. We have the strategy of widening roads that can help reduce some bottlenecks and improve or reduce congestion. Then we have buckets around, I don't know if we have a ton of projects in this bucket, but ways to move freight and goods, really focusing on those big, long vehicles that maybe take a little bit longer to start up at stoplights or take up more space on our roadways. So things we can do, parking is a good example too, and probably downtown is delivery type strategies. So there's different ways we have several different ways and tactics we can use to manage congestion essentially. So where are we putting all of our money? So about 60%, this is a really a rough analysis. This was kind of just, if a project was tagged with one of these strategies, the money got divided evenly. So it's not going down to like what different elements and projects costed necessarily. So we had 60% of our money essentially going towards capacity. The second biggest was the active transportation component, which are oftentimes tagged on to like a lot of the capacity type projects we're doing now. You're seeing a lot of the multi-use pathways come on with the capacity projects. So that was the second biggest bucket of money, followed by the TDM active transportation, then TSMO, and then, like I mentioned, I think there was only one project that had freight and goods mobility tagged to it. So it kind of shows you where we're putting our eggs. So I talked a little bit about, I know the chairwoman just left, but we were able to look at this falls into that TSMO and ITS type strategies in being able to monitor the performance of your intersections and then make adjustments. So this was one that I worked with Nampa's traffic engineer on. They asked me to look at some of the travel time changes after they had made a signal timing modification, and they were looking at see that red circle shows the orange was the after, the blue was before. They were able to save a couple of minutes. I think it was like a minute and a half or maybe a minute and some change travel time in this area. And then you can see those mountains are really the reliability. So they were able to really dramatically improve the reliability as well through this intersection and on this corridor just by making a signal timing modification. So moving forward, yeah, we have lots of capacity projects going on. I'm sure several of you have driven the interstate lately on the west end. There's a lot going on. 2026 coming on, 44, State Highway 16 coming in, State Highway 55 Karcher Road. I-84 is doing a mobility study on the interstate, looking at some of the potential auxiliary lanes and ramp metering. So that's in progress. That falls in kind of with those TSMO ITS buckets. ITD recently adopted a TSMO and ITS plan and strategy, and they're now have some dedicated funding to implement some of those strategies. So I think we'll see more of that coming forward through ITD. I talked to ITD headquarters a little bit about what some of their initiatives are. They're looking at updating some of their traffic incident management systems training. So how you respond to these different incidents on the interstate, how we all work together with first responders, traffic operations agencies, those types of things. So that's coming soon. We'll be working on our TSMO ITS strategy in 2027, 2028. And then we have a smart corridors plan program for 2027, which will look a little bit like the I-84 corridor operations study that we did a couple years back, but mainly focusing on the Nampa Caldwell Boulevard area. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
I don't know who I should address.
It's okay. Nicole, this is Tony. Crystal needed to leave, so I didn't know if you were still going to be present, if you could take over the meeting, or I can do that if you want me to.
I think Nicole also.
Go ahead. Questions?
I just have a quick question on if winter weather was taken into account for the reliability of travel and travel times. I didn't quite get a good enough glance on the calendar to see what parts of the year might have had some of those more unpredictable days, but I was just curious if that was taken into account during analysis.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, you can see there was some disruption near December, January, but I mean, September, October seemed to be the highest months where we had those events. I think we do need to think about winter operations. That's definitely falls into that bucket of TSMO type ITS strategies, like the digital messaging systems, encouraging people to slow down, letting them know there's ice on the roadway. There's a couple spots we know ice up on the interstate that we identified in the operations plan where we could put like a kind of a dynamic warning, like a flashing ice on road type thing. So there's things we could do definitely around winter operations, and I know it's something ITD's taken into consideration. So.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, go ahead, Bree. We've got a question in house too.
I forgot how to raise my hand on Zoom. I'm sorry about that. My question is if you have considered overlaying for that comparison you did with other cities, what % of their trips they're able to divert on transit, or perhaps like overlay what their transit ridership is like in those cities. It would just be really interesting to see like how those stack up and mitigate commuter frustration and congestion.
Thanks, Bree. No, I haven't thought about that. We have done some analysis on similar to like the growth map that I showed, like where we have transit routes and how those line up with some of the congestion as well. I haven't put those in the report in the recent years, but I've done some of that exercise before. And maybe that's something good to include in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair, Jason Wild. Just looking at this calendar, did you find correlation of events that happen on those days that pushed you above 30%?
I didn't get to that level of detail. It was really just looking at the travel times and seeing what's going on. So it could be anything like from weather to construction to different variable things. But I think it doesn't necessarily matter what's going on. It's the point that those commuters on those weekdays sat on the freeway longer, right? And the number of days is growing each year. So I think we need to think about that as well. Some of the TSMO ITS strategies are around construction zone management and work zone management and ways we can better improve efficiency around that and less impact to commuters. So I didn't necessarily look at like crash data or construction zone data when I did this analysis.
Your thesis is that it's construction.
It could be an accident. There's the fatalities that really impact congestion on some of these days. It could be some congestion with work zones, but yeah, I don't have a direct correlation to what it was. I think we know it could be several of those factors.
Is there any analysis that's done to show if there's a 30% drop on any of these days? In other words, that it was faster on another day?
No, this is looking at average and then 30% above average. There's days where it's faster. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just looking for explanation as to why, right? So that you can fix it.
Yeah. I don't think there's one. I don't think it's a one thing. That's the problem with it. I don't think it's just an accident or just construction. And so it's looking at how we do kind of all the factors that can contribute. Winter operations, for example, clearing crashes faster. That's that traffic incident management type thing I talked about, better coordinating with first responders and operations, informing the traveler better with messaging systems. Don't get on the interstate, it's closed. So it's really a wide range of different strategies that we need to implement in order to mitigate these issues.
Do you mind going back to the graph, how we compare to other cities? As you guys look at this, and it looks like we are less reliable than Salt Lake in comparison reliability with Reno. Am I reading that right?
Less. So the intensity of traffic here is less than Salt Lake, but we are less reliable than Salt Lake City's travel times.
Feel about that? How do you feel about how you lock in with these cities and what those cities are doing versus what we're doing? And how do you feel about where we fall on this chart?
So I think some of it has to do with geography, right? I think we only have one interstate. We have a river running through here. So I think some of the reliability issues are stemming from the interstate and being the fact that we only have one interstate option really to get us east-west, right? It's just a geographic challenge and something that we deal with and a constraint that we have that maybe some of these other areas don't necessarily. I don't know Boulder too well, to be honest. I'm from Reno. I have some perspective there. I know they have two interstates, kind of 395 and I-80 coming through there. So they have a few more options and a little bit different commuter patterns. But I think some of that is contributed to the system that we have now. So.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, we will move on to the next item with Austin.
All right. Typically, my notes start with thank you, Madam Chair, but I guess thank you, ragtag chairless bunch of individuals here. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. So, Austin Miller, Planning Team Lead at Compass. I'm just going to be giving you all, I will promise to keep it brief, status report of Communities Motion 2055, our next regional long-range transportation plan. To boil the components of a long-range transportation down, really down for simplicity's sake, today we're going to talk about the projects, our regional priorities, and then that funding and implementation component. I'm going to go over a bit of each of these and the outlook of them as we move from Communities in Motion 2050 to Communities in Motion 2055. So for project identification, I had given a presentation to you all, like 364 days ago, I think it was at the November meeting last year, on how member agency efforts really support and inform the development of projects in Communities in Motion. So just a reminder on that, project identification comes from a litany of different sources, including state and regional and local planning efforts over the last several years that have identified and really helped refine transportation projects and the needs within Ada and Canyon counties. We also can use a technical deficiency analysis to help identify where those network deficiencies may occur, really looking at those out years that some of our local planning efforts might not hit. What could we maybe expect to see based on our demographic forecasts? We can then bring that information back to you all to discuss. Is this something worth including in the plan? Is there not really an appetite for it? Sort of see where that conversation goes. So because much of this work is done by you all at your agencies, I wouldn't expect a ton of RTAC discussion right up front on these meetings, but don't be surprised if, as the representative for your specific agencies, we reach out to you and compare what we're aware of versus what you're aware of on your end, what all you've been doing, and just make sure that we do have everything covered. Then we as Compass will compile all of that and then can bring it back to the group for a broader discussion. At that past November meeting, we also discussed that how we prioritize these projects would really take some input. So thanks again to all of your help. Back in March, we had conducted a survey to really help us inform that project prioritization. It was our Move What Matters survey. And Alexa had presented those results to you in April. Just a real quick reminder, convenience and safety were the two most important regional goals of Communities in Motion based on survey responses. And the main outcome that participants had indicated they wanted to see was keeping our transportation in good shape. So we are working through our work groups now to review what that draft prioritization would be and developing the methodology for the various modes. So for example, our active transportation work group met last week to discuss some of the regional pathway prioritization process. Once we get to a good place with our work groups, we'll bring that back to RTAC for review, discussion, edits, and then eventually a recommendation to the Compass board. Then while that list of priority projects is helpful, ultimately identifying potential funding sources and developing implementation strategies is needed to help reach the outcomes that the members of our public have told us they are looking for. So the next step is to really dive into that funding policy. Once we have our projects, our priorities, and our funding policy, we can then go about building the short-term funded list, that long-term funded list, and identifying what some of those long-term unfunded needs are. So this component, specifically the funding side of it, is something that we're planning on working with you all as RTAC a little bit more directly. I anticipate this would take a couple meetings, so you'll probably see it as information discussion type items at first before we actually get to the recommendation. So we can have a chance to talk about what the trade-offs are to any potential changes we may want to consider as a region. schedule on when we can expect to hit on each of these. So through now, as I mentioned, the work has already begun, but hoping to wrap it up in the spring. We have the determining what that prioritization process will be, and those individual outreach meetings with you all for project identification, make sure we have all the right stuff. That identification will probably carry into summer a little bit, but once we've completed with that, then actually act on that prioritization process that had been previously identified. And then winter time, we're hoping to have that refined, prioritized project list. And we'll have several conversations by then as to what implementation strategies and funding looks like moving forward. So with that, thank you all so much for your time. I know we did go a little bit over, but I do have some time for questions if anybody's got them.
Are there any questions?
Awesome.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And watch your emails to find out if December is canceled, but please don't take it off of your agenda yet. Thank you so much for attending today.